I stood on that stage at the Plaza Hotel, my sister Vanessa's face contorting in rage as the FBI agents read her rights, and I felt absolutely nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just the cold, hollow echo of a childhood I could never get back. The chandeliers cast fractured light across her tear-streaked face as she screamed my name like a curse, and all I could think was how fitting it was that our family's empire would crumble in the same gilded cage where we learned to destroy each other. But before I tell you how I brought down the woman who spent 28 years making my life hell, I need you to do something for me. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who refuse to stay victims. And comment below, tell me, have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family? Because that's exactly what I had to do. Now let me take you back to where this really began, back to when I was still trying to earn love from people who saw me as nothing more than a disappointment in designer clothes. I was 7 years old the first time my mother looked at me with disgust. Not anger, not frustration, disgust, like I was something unclean she'd accidentally touched. Vanessa had just won first place at her piano recital, and I'd nervously shown Mum my science fair project, a working model of the solar system I'd spent 3 months building in our garage. She glanced at it for exactly 2 seconds before turning back to fawn over Vanessa's trophy. "That's adorable, Riley," she said in that tone that meant it was anything but. "Now go wash up for dinner. You have grease under your fingernails." That was the pattern that would define my entire childhood. Vanessa was the golden child, perfect in every quantifiable way. Perfect posture, perfect grades at the right schools, perfect friends from the right families. And I was the strange one, the girl who preferred circuit boards to cotillions, who asked too many questions and didn't care enough about the right answers. While Vanessa learned to navigate country club politics, I was taking apart our family computer to understand how it worked. While she mastered the art of the charitable smile, I was teaching myself to code in our garage, surrounded by pizza boxes and old electronics I'd salvaged from dumpsters. My parents, Robert and Catherine Hale, were old money, the kind of people who measured worth in surnames and stock portfolios. Dad ran a hedge fund, Mum sat on every prestigious board in Manhattan, and together they crafted an image of the perfect American family. Except I kept ruining the portrait. I was too loud, too curious, too uninterested in being moulded into their vision of what a Hale daughter should be. So they did what people like them always do. They invested in the child who reflected their values and wrote off the one who didn't. When I was 16, I hacked into the school's computer system not to change grades, but to prove a point about their laughable security. I wrote a detailed report on every vulnerability and submitted it to the principal with recommendations for fixes. I thought I was being helpful. They thought I was being a delinquent. The school wanted to expel me. My parents were mortified not because their daughter might be kicked out, but because word got out at their country club. Vanessa cried not from concern, but because it overshadowed her acceptance to Yale. Mum wouldn't speak to me for 2 months. Dad just looked disappointed, that particular expression he'd perfected, the one that said I was a problem he didn't have the bandwidth to solve. I survived on my grandmother's love, the only person in that entire family who saw me as something other than a defect. Grandma Hale was a firecracker, a self-made woman who'd built her own fortune in real estate before marrying into the family. She understood ambition that didn't come gift-wrapped in tradition. Every Sunday I'd escape to her brownstone in Brooklyn, and she'd listen to my ideas, actually listen, while we ate Chinese takeout and played chess. "You're not broken, Riley," she told me once, her weathered hands covering mine. "You're just built for a different game than they're playing." When I was 19, I dropped out of Columbia after 1 semester. Not because I was failing, I had a 4.0, but because I'd started a company in my dorm room. HaleSec, a cybersecurity firm that I built from scratch with 2 other hackers I'd met online. We started by securing small businesses, then mid-sized companies, and within 3 years we were handling corporate accounts. My parents were horrified. "You threw away a Columbia education for this garage startup nonsense," Dad shouted during one of our last family dinners together. You're an embarrassment to this family." Vanessa, meanwhile, had graduated from Yale with honours, landed a coveted position at a non-profit, and eventually took over the family's charitable foundation, the Hale Foundation. She was everything they'd ever wanted: polished, connected, publicly altruistic. She threw galas that got covered in the Times, made speeches about helping disadvantaged youth, and photographed beautifully for their annual reports, the perfect Hale daughter. But I knew something they didn't. I saw the way Vanessa's smile never reached her eyes. I noticed the subtle cruelty in her perfectly worded compliments, the way she'd position herself in photos to make me look awkward, how she'd share my failures at dinner parties disguised as concerned sisterly worry. She was a predator in Prada, and I was her favourite prey. For years I stayed away. I built my company, proved myself in an industry that didn't care about my last name, only about whether I could protect their data. I bought a loft in Tribeca, with my own money, hired brilliant people, and slowly, quietly became successful. Not Hale family successful, but successful in a way that mattered to me. I was happy, or at least I thought I was. I'd made peace with being the family outcast. Then everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning in March, when Forbes published their 30 Under 30 issue, and my face was on the cover. The headline read, "The Woman Defending America, How Riley Hale Built a Cybersecurity Empire from a College Dorm." The article detailed our upcoming contract with the Department of Defense, a $50 million deal to overhaul their security infrastructure. It was the culmination of 6 years of relentless work, proof that I'd been right to bet on myself. My phone exploded with congratulatory messages. My team celebrated in the office with champagne. Investors who'd previously ghosted me suddenly wanted meetings. It was validation, pure and intoxicating. My parents sent a text, saw the article. "We'll discuss this at Sunday dinner." No congratulations, no pride, just an ominous summons. Vanessa didn't contact me at all, and somehow that was worse. That Sunday, I drove to their penthouse on 5th Avenue, the same apartment where I'd felt like a stranger my entire childhood. The doorman greeted me with surprise, as if he'd forgotten the Hales had 2 daughters. When I stepped into the living room with its sterile white furniture and aggressive modern art, they were all waiting. Mum, Dad and Vanessa arranged like a tribunal. Dad spoke first, his voice carrying that boardroom authority he wielded like a weapon. "This defence contract, Riley. It's going to put our family name in the spotlight. We need to discuss how you'll represent us." "Represent you?" I laughed, genuinely confused. "This has nothing to do with you. This is my company, my contract, my work." Mum's face tightened. "Everything you do reflects on this family. Your grandmother's health is failing, and when she passes, God forbid there will be estate matters to settle. We need to present a unified front." And there it was. Not pride in my accomplishment, but concern about inheritance and appearances. I glanced at Vanessa, who sat there with a serene smile, hands folded in her lap like a Madonna. She hadn't said a word, but I could feel her satisfaction radiating across the room. I tried to change the subject. "How's the foundation going, Vanessa? I heard you're planning a big gala next month." Her smile widened, showing perfect white teeth. "It's going wonderfully. We raised $3 million last quarter for underprivileged children's education. Some of us believe in giving back, not just taking." The dig was subtle enough that our parents missed it, but I felt it like a blade between my ribs. I left that dinner with a tension headache and a sinking feeling that my success had somehow made me even more of a target. I didn't know how right I was. 2 weeks later, the hit pieces started. First, it was a gossip site claiming I'd lied about my credentials. Then a financial blog questioning whether my company's valuation was inflated. Then, most damaging, a series of leaked emails suggesting HaleSec had experienced a data breach we'd covered up. None of it was true, but in the age of viral outrage, truth didn't matter as much as headlines. My investors panicked. Our stock price dropped 15% in a single day. The Department of Defense asked for a meeting to discuss concerns about our security practices. I spent 72 hours straight doing damage control, issuing statements providing evidence threatening lawsuits. My legal team traced the leaks back to a burner email account, but the trail went cold. I knew who was behind it. I'd always known what Vanessa was capable of, but I didn't have proof, and in my world, suspicion meant nothing without evidence. The attacks continued, each one more calculated than the last. Someone leaked photos of me from college partying at a club, and suddenly there were articles questioning whether I was mature enough to handle government contracts. My childhood therapist's notes were somehow obtained and mischaracterized, painting me as unstable. It was a professional assassination executed with surgical precision. I snapped on a Thursday afternoon. I'd just gotten off a call with our biggest investor who was threatening to pull out, and I looked at my calendar to see another media training session scheduled to teach me how to rehabilitate my image. My image. The one I'd spent years building through actual work, now being destroyed by someone who'd never earned anything that wasn't handed to her on a trust fund platter. I grabbed my keys, told my assistant I'd be back in 2 hours, and drove straight to Vanessa's penthouse in Tribical. She lived in one of those glass towers where the doorman wore white gloves and the lobby smelled like money and orchids. I'd never been to her place before. We weren't that kind of sisters. The doorman tried to stop me. I told him to call up or get out of my way. Something in my face must have convinced him I wasn't leaving because he made the call. "She'll see you," he said, looking uncomfortable. 23rd floor. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened directly into her apartment at Architectural Flex, I found obnoxious Vanessa was waiting. She wore cream-coloured loungewear that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and she held a glass of white wine like we were old friends catching up. "Riley," she said, fake warmth dripping from every syllable. What a surprise. "Cut the act," I said, stepping into her living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Central Park like a painting. The space was all neutral tones and carefully curated art, sterile as a museum. "This is you. The leaks, the hit pieces, all of it. I know it's you." She took a sip of wine, unbothered. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you're just not as perfect as you thought you were. Maybe people are finally seeing the real you." The real me. I stepped closer, anger burning through my usual control. The real me built something from nothing. What have you ever built, Vanessa? Besides a career, playing dress-up with other people's money. Her mask slipped just for a second, and I saw pure hatred flash across her face. "You're a stain on this family. You always have been. Walking around with your moral superiority, acting like you're better than us because you code and wear hoodies. You're not special, Riley. You're a dropout who got lucky." Lucky, I laughed, a harsh sound. "I worked 16-hour days while you were at galas taking selfies. I earned every single thing I have." She set down her wine glass hard enough that I thought it might shatter. "You think you've won something with your little government contract? You think that makes you legitimate? I'm going to destroy you. By the time I'm done, nobody will touch Hailsec with a 10-foot pole. You'll be back in our parents' garage where you belong, begging Dad for money like the charity case you are." The confession hung in the air between us. I'd come here angry, but now I felt something colder, something more dangerous. Clarity. "You're going to destroy me," I said softly, pulling out my phone. I started recording. "Say that again, for the record." Vanessa lunged for my phone, but I stepped back. Her face transformed into something ugly. All pretense of sophistication gone. "You can't prove anything. Nobody will believe you." "Maybe not yet," I said, backing toward the elevator. "But I'm going to find out exactly what you've been doing, Vanessa. And when I do, I'm not going to give you the mercy you never gave me." The elevator doors closed on her, screaming at me to get out, and I felt something shift inside me. I was done being prey. If she wanted to play predator, I'd show her what a real hunt looked like. Back at my office, I called an emergency meeting with Nolan, my head counsel, and the closest thing I had to a true friend in this business. Nolan was brilliant, ruthless when necessary, and had been with me since year 2 of Hailsec. I trusted him with everything. "I need you to investigate my sister," I told him, laying out everything I knew. Every attack, every leak, every perfectly timed piece of bad press. Find the connection, find the proof. He nodded, already taking notes. "And if we find something, then we bury her," I said. "Not in the press, in the courts. I want her to pay legally for every single thing she's done." What he found was worse than I imagined. It took Nolan 3 weeks working with a private investigator and a forensic accountant. The investigator, Mike Wolf, was a former FBI agent who specialised in financial crimes. When they came to my office with their report, both men looked grim. "Your sister has been embezzling from the family foundation," Nolan said, spreading documents across my conference table. "We're talking millions over the past 3 years. She's been using the money to cover gambling debts, bad investments, and maintaining a lifestyle she can't actually afford. My stomach dropped. The foundation. The one thing Vanessa was supposed to be good at, the thing that made our parents so proud. She's stealing from children. Mike Wolfe spoke up, his voice gravelly from years of interrogations. It gets worse. She hired me 6 months ago to dig up dirt on you, or create it if necessary. She paid me $50,000 up front from the foundation's accounts. When I figured out where the money was coming from, I stopped working for her. That's when I reached out to your counsel. He slid a folder across the table. These are the bank statements, the communications, everything. She's been using the foundation as her personal piggy bank. The gala she's throwing next month, half the budget is going into her pocket. I stared at the documents, feeling sick. Why would she risk this? Our parents are loaded. She's the favourite. She could have asked them for money. Nolan leaned back. I did some digging into your family's financials. Your grandmother's will was recently updated. She's leaving the bulk of her estate to you, not Vanessa. Your parents know this. My guess, Vanessa needs to maintain her position as the golden child because she knows she's about to lose the inheritance she was counting on. Everything clicked into place. Vanessa wasn't just jealous, she was desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. What do you want to do? Nolan asked. We can take this to the authorities now, or we can wait. I thought about my grandmother, who I'd visited just last week. She'd held my hand with fingers that shook from age and told me how proud she was. I thought about all the children the foundation was supposed to help, the ones whose education money was being spent on my sister's Chanel bags and spa weekends. I want to give her a chance to hang herself, I said slowly. She's planning to humiliate me at Grandma's birthday party next month, isn't she? Nolan nodded. We intercepted some communications. She's planning some kind of public reveal, probably more fabricated evidence against you. Perfect, I said, feeling that cold clarity settle over me again. Let her. Give her enough rope and she'll tie the noose herself. The next month was the longest of my life. I had to play the part of the defeated sister, letting Vanessa think she was winning. I leaked fake information about Hailsec's financial troubles, planted stories about investor concerns, even staged a meeting where I pretended to fire key employees. It killed me to watch my team stress over rumours I was creating, but I promised them it was temporary and necessary. They trusted me, which made it worse. Meanwhile, Nolan and Mike built an airtight case. They got court orders for Vanessa's financial records, reached out to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and documented every single instance of embezzlement and fraud. They found the burner accounts she'd used to spread lies about me, traced payments to journalists and PR firms she'd hired to destroy my reputation. It was comprehensive, damning, and completely irrefutable. Vanessa, for her part, became increasingly bold. She started doing interviews about the foundation's good work, positioning herself as a moral voice in New York society. She gave a TED talk about ethical philanthropy that went viral. She even had the audacity to mention me in an interview, expressing sisterly concern about my company's struggles and hoping I'd find my way. The entire time I smiled and took it. I went to family dinners and let my parents lecture me about responsibility. I listened to my mother worry about how my failures would reflect on them. I watched Vanessa bask in their approval, knowing exactly what she'd done to maintain it. And I waited. Grandma's 90th birthday party was supposed to be the social event of the season. Vanessa had insisted on planning it at the Plaza Hotel, the same place where our parents had celebrated their anniversary, where Vanessa herself had her debutante ball. The guest list included every important family and New York business leaders, politicians, and enough press to cover a presidential campaign. Vanessa had spared no expense, which was ironic, considering she was using stolen money to pay for it. The day of the party, I stood in my apartment looking at myself in the mirror. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, nothing that would compete with Vanessa's inevitable peacocking. Nolan had delivered the final documents that morning. Everything was ready. "Are you sure about this?" he'd asked. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Your family will never forgive you." I know, I'd said, but I'm done asking permission to take up space in my own life. The Plaza's grand ballroom was exactly as ostentatious as I'd expected. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen tears. Tables dressed in white silk filled the space, each centerpiece a small fortune in orchids and roses. A string quartet played in the corner, and waiters in white gloves circulated with champagne and canapes. It was beautiful in that aggressive way wealthy people mistake for taste. Grandma sat at the head table looking frail but happy. When she saw me, her face lit up. I made my way over, kissed her cheek, and sat beside her for a few precious minutes before Vanessa's show began. My sister was holding court in the centre of the room, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. She threw her head back, laughing at something someone said, and I marvelled at how good she was at pretending to be human. The speeches started after dinner. Various family friends talked about Grandma's legacy, her charity, her grace. Then Vanessa stood up, microphone in hand, looking out at the crowd with practiced humility. "Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate our grandmother," she began. "She's an inspiration to all of us, a woman who taught us that true success means using our blessings to help others." I watched from my seat as she continued warming up her audience with stories and sentiment. Then right on schedule, her tone shifted. "Which is why it breaks my heart to address something difficult tonight," she said, and the room went silent. "You've all heard the rumours about my sister's company. I've tried to protect her, to give her privacy to handle her struggles. But as someone who believes in transparency and accountability, I can't stay silent anymore." She nodded to someone in the back, and suddenly the screens positioned around the room lit up with what looked like internal HailSec documents, emails, allegedly showing we'd covered up security breaches, financial statements, supposedly proving fraud. Riley has lied to investors, lied to clients, and worst of all, she's lied to the Department of Defense. Vanessa said, her voice dripping with fake regret. I tried to help her, but she refused. So tonight, in front of people who care about integrity and truth, I'm exposing her fraud. The room erupted in shocked whispers. I felt hundreds of eyes turn to me. My parents looked horrified, not at Vanessa's accusations, but at me for bringing shame to the family. Some people were already pulling out their phones, no doubt preparing to share this scandal on social media. I stood up slowly, calmly, and walked toward the stage. Vanessa watched me approach with barely concealed triumph. "Are you done?" I asked, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. She blinked. "What?" I said, "Are you done? Because I have a presentation too, and I think everyone here is going to want to see it." I nodded to Nolan, who stood near the AV booth. The screens flickered, went black, and then lit up again. But this time they showed Vanessa's Swiss bank account statements, her gambling receipts from Atlantic City, her credit card bills showing hundreds of thousands in personal expenses, all paid from foundation accounts. Wire transfers, forged signatures, and most damning of all, the email chains, where she'd hired people to fabricate evidence against me. The gasps this time were real. "You want to talk about fraud?" "Vanessa," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. "Let's talk about the $3 million you've stolen from the Hale Foundation over the past 3 years. Let's talk about how you've been using money meant for underprivileged children to fund your shopping addiction and cover your gambling debts." Vanessa's face went white. She started reaching for the microphone. "That's fake. She doctored those documents." I pulled out my phone, projecting an audio file. Everyone heard her voice crystal clear from that day in her apartment. "I'm going to destroy you. By the time I'm done, nobody will touch HailSec with a 10-foot pole." Then there was more. Hours of recorded phone calls where she instructed people to plant false stories. Text messages discussing how to time the attacks for maximum damage. An entire digital paper trail of her campaign to ruin me. The room was dead silent now, except for the damning evidence playing through the speakers. "You tried to destroy me because you couldn't stand that I succeeded without our parents' approval, without playing by your rules," I said, walking closer to her. "You stole from children, Vanessa. Children. And you have the audacity to stand here and lecture me about integrity." She lunged at me then, completely losing control. The mask shattered. She grabbed for my phone, screaming incoherently something about lies and jealousy, and how I'd always been jealous of her. I caught her wrist easily. Years of rock climbing and boxing classes paid off as I twisted her arm and pushed her back. "Don't touch me," I said coldly. "You're done touching me, done touching my company, and done touching that foundation." That's when the doors opened and FBI agents walked in. I'd timed it perfectly. Mike Wolfe had coordinated with his former colleagues to serve the warrant during the party, ensuring maximum visibility. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure everyone saw who Vanessa really was, stripping away her ability to manipulate the narrative later. Vanessa Hale, the lead agent, said you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud and money laundering. The room exploded, people were standing shouting questions, cameras flashing. Vanessa fell apart, completely grabbing at our father's arm, screaming for him to fix this, to make it stop. He stood there, frozen, his face grey. Mum had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face, but not for me, never for me. They put handcuffs on Vanessa, and she fought every step of the way, screaming my name like an accusation, like this was something I'd done to her rather than something she'd done to herself. As they led her past me, she hissed, "You'll never be one of us. You'll always be the freak who didn't fit in." I looked her dead in the eye. "Thank God for that," I said. The aftermath was chaos. Reporters mobbed me as I left. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, but I didn't care about any of that. I went straight to Grandma, who was still sitting at the head table, looking shocked, but not surprised. "I'm sorry," I said, kneeling beside her chair. "I'm sorry your birthday got ruined. I'm sorry it came to this." She cupped my face with her weathered hands, those hands that had always been kind to me. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "You didn't ruin my birthday. You cleaned house. That girl needed to be stopped before she destroyed herself and everyone around her." She pulled me into a hug and I let myself cry for the first time in months. Not from sadness, but from relief, from the release of carrying that weight. The next morning, every major news outlet ran the story. Socialite arrested for foundation fraud. Hale empire crumbles in public scandal. Tech CEO exposes sister's criminal enterprise. The photos of Vanessa being led away in handcuffs went viral. Her TED Talk was pulled offline. The foundation immediately appointed an independent board and launched a full audit. My parents called once. Dad asked if I was happy now destroying the family. I told him I hadn't destroyed anything. I'd simply stopped letting them destroy me. I hung up, blocked their numbers, and haven't spoken to them since. The Department of Defense investigation concluded within a week. All charges against HaleSec were dropped when they saw the evidence of Vanessa's fabrication campaign. Not only did we keep the $50 million contract, we were asked to bid on 2 more. Investors who'd fled came crawling back, but I was selective about who I let back in. Some doors once closed should stay that way. Vanessa's trial was quick. With Mike Wolf's evidence and multiple federal charges, her lawyers advised her to take a plea deal. She's currently serving 5 years in a minimum security prison. Our parents didn't attend a single court date. I heard they've moved to their summer house in the Hamptons full-time, trying to escape the scandal. I visited Grandma every week until she passed away peacefully in her sleep 4 months later. True to form, she'd left me everything. Her house, her stocks, her jewellery, and a letter that I keep in my desk drawer. In it, she wrote, "You were always the brave one, Riley. The only one of us who had the courage to be real. Make them all regret underestimating you." HaleSec is now valued at over $200 million. We've expanded to offices in 4 cities and employ over 300 people. I hired Mike Wolf as head of internal security, and he's been worth every penny. Nolan became our COO, and my best friend, the brother I chose, rather than the sister I was born with. I still live in the same Tribeca loft, though I could afford a penthouse now. I don't need the upgrade. I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I date when I want to, work when I need to, and spend my weekends rock climbing and teaching coding classes to kids from low-income neighbourhoods. The ones Vanessa's foundation was supposed to help but never did. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things ended with my family. If I wish I'd handled it differently, kept it private, tried to work things out. The answer is no. Some relationships are so toxic that the only healthy option is amputation. You don't negotiate with cancer. You cut it out and hope you got clean margins. My parents made their choice decades ago when they decided one daughter was worth loving and the other was worth tolerating. Vanessa made her choice when she decided destroying me was easier than dealing with her own failures. I simply made the choice to stop letting them define my worth. Here's what I learnt from being the family scapegoat who became the family scandal, who became the family success story. Your value isn't determined by people who can't see you clearly. Your worth doesn't decrease because someone couldn't handle your growth. And sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from people who only know how to take. I didn't just survive my family, I outlived their version of who I was supposed to be and built myself into who I actually am. A woman who codes in hoodies, climbs mountains on weekends, runs a company that protects people's most valuable data, and sleeps soundly at night because she doesn't owe anyone anything except herself. The predator became prey, just not in the way Vanessa intended. She hunted me thinking I was weak, only to discover I'd been sharpening my teeth the whole time. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been made to feel small by people who should have made you feel safe? Have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family's expectations? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. Hit that like button if you believe in choosing yourself even when it costs you everything. And subscribe, because I'm done being silent about what it really takes to survive a family that sees you as competition rather than kin. Remember this, you don't owe anyone your suffering. Not your parents, not your siblings, not anyone. You are allowed to thrive even if it makes others uncomfortable, especially if it makes them uncomfortable. Because the people who truly love you will celebrate your success, not sabotage it. And if they can't handle your growth, that's not your problem to fix. That's theirs.